So my name is Chris Yalonis. This session is on measuring what matters, which is around how do you measure environmental and social performance of your organizations. Oftentimes we're very good at measuring financial and economic performance, but how do you measure some of these other intangible goals that you're trying to reach as an organization? I teach this subject as well as entrepreneurship at Sonoma State. I run a small consultancy down in Marin that helps companies green their operations. And I also chair the Green Committee of the Chamber down there. So we work with about 600 companies in our chamber and work with them on outreach programs and educational programs. So I'm going to try to bring some best practices and some thought leadership, but also align it with sort of the practical realities of running a small and medium organization. Anybody with an organization over 500 employees? Okay, so you are, okay.
Just barely.
Oh, just barely, okay, in phase, sure.
Yeah.
Pretty unique though in the North Bay. Most of us are small, medium-sized organizations, so that's what I'm going to focus on today. I'd like it to be interactive, so if you've got some questions or you want to relate it to your particular sector or what you're working on as a social entrepreneur, please raise the issues. A little bit about what I'm doing. We help companies green their operations. I do a lot of work with entrepreneurs and new products. So if you've got new products that you're introducing, we help you define the value proposition, test market the products and the concept, do pricing tests, that sort of thing. And we have about a 6 million person panel that we can run these tests against. And so if you're looking for left-handed Hispanics in Denver, we can find those folks and test your products and services with them. I work with the Venture Greenhouse down in San Rafael. It's Marin's only accelerator and incubator. We've got about 10 startups there, and we've launched in the history over the past 3 years about 40 companies, and many of them have become very successful. In fact, Enphase bought one of the companies.
From the next phase
services. That's right. That was a Venture Greenhouse startup.
Good going.
Yeah. So there's a success story. Enphase bought them, and so I'll bring some stories from that group. But if any of you are involved in startups or know of people that are looking for a strong network of advisors and a place to really accelerate the business, the Venture Greenhouse is looking for a new cohort, and they're just recruiting now. So the next month or two is a good window for people interested in getting into an accelerator to get down there. All right, so sustainability intelligence is a term that draws upon business intelligence. That's been a term that we have used in business for a long time, right? It's analytics, it's measuring the performance of the organization, externally and internally. And sustainability metrics then, performance, baselines, progress reports, draw upon that discipline. And we as practitioners of sustainability, we're drowning in data, right? We've just got all kinds of information coming from various sources, but we're really starved for meaning of that data and what that really means for impact and what it means for our organization. So what we want to develop is intelligence that helps us make better decisions, helps us direct our resources and our people so that they can have good impact. One of the other drivers of this sort of type of intelligence is that we've got to battle for resources. When you have an initiative around recycling or new product design, managing your supply chain, you've got to go to the CFO typically with a case that says, all right, I'm looking for some particular headcounts, I'm looking for some money, or I'm looking to allocate my time to this initiative. She's got to be on board. She's got to say, okay, what's the payoff for that, right? So there's got to be typically a business case behind our initiatives that we're espousing. If you got her on board, you've got the rest of the C-suite on board typically. You've got the president on board or the executive director on board. We also want to empower our teams, right? Our green teams, our champions, our interns that are working on these projects. They want to know where they're going, right? They want to know some goals. They want to know how they're doing, from a performance perspective. So that's why we want to measure our progress. Now, oftentimes we also want to establish a baseline, right, from which we can kind of measure progress. So oftentimes, how many of you have done assessments where you established a baseline for, water or your waste diversion, or so you've done a little bit of that already, right? And we find that a lot in GHG measurement, for example, right? How are we doing in terms of our carbon footprint for the organization? And we've got calculators out there from the EPA. Cal Berkeley's got some good calculators, and they're out there. And so we can establish a baseline for carbon, right? And then we say, all right, where are some things that we can work on to lower our footprint as an organization? And oftentimes we'll measure that either by year or a couple of years. It's going to take some time to get some of these carbon projects in place. Diversion from landfill is another baseline we often see when we're doing waste audits. So those of you who are interested in either a zero waste campaign or lowering your landfill, oftentimes we'll do some dumpster diving, and we'll figure out where our waste is between the recyclables, compostables, and then what really would go to landfill. And so we establish this baseline. So that's what I mean by baseline. And oftentimes you all want to establish the programs or the metrics that mean sustainability for your own organization, right? Sustainability means this for our organization. Because I'm not going to mandate, and no certification program is going to mandate what sustainability means for your organization, right? You've got to decide that, because you'll need to own that, right? The team and the employees need to own what you want to measure, right? And typically, it's not more than about 5 or 6 or 7 measures. That's it for a small organization. That's all you can really work on. But if you do it right, that has big impact, and it shows people what you're doing, and you get people behind it. So we want to establish some baselines around the things that we want to measure. And then obviously we'll have goals coming out of that assessment, right? You do a baseline, you say, all right, let's take diversion from, let's talk about waste. Have an organization, you're looking at your waste streams, you're looking at your waste hauler, and you're establishing what percentage is recyclable, what percentage is compostable, what is truly waste and not, and is going to be going to a landfill. And you say, all right, where are those streams coming from? How can we reduce those things, right? It might be paper, it might be, food handling materials or paper or utensils that is not compostable, right? Or that maybe you switch out the vendor providing those materials. So what happens with these assessments is you get a sense of your low-hanging fruit, right? We find where we can do better. And so that naturally leads into initiatives and into some goal setting, right? So you do your assessments, you say, all right, we're going to focus on these 3 or 4 programs, at least initiatives in this first year. Do some tests, do some initiatives, and get some traction. And I love the low-hanging fruit stuff, right? And the quick successes, because you want to show that to the boss, you want to show that to your customers, you want to show that to the press. So pick some things that are, fairly easy to achieve, but have good impact and are frankly good PR. I mean, I'd like to showcase those kind of little initiatives. And then what we want to do, once we have established those kind of goals and programs, we want to have success measures, right? And the simple question is, how do we know if we're succeeding? How do we know if we're accomplishing anything? And so we're going to talk a little bit about the metrics and the measures that we want to use. Once we've done that, we want to then authentically report that out, right? We don't want to just keep it internally, even though it may be a little embarrassing. Nothing wrong with saying, listen, this is our baseline. We were putting half of our waste stream to the landfill. That's a baseline. People will forgive you if you say, listen, I'm at fault. We're not doing some things very well here, but here's our goal over the next couple of years in terms of getting that level to a 75, or rather down to a 10% to landfill. Right? So we're going from 50% landfill over, all the way down to 10%. So as a goal, for example, right? So why do we want to report those things out? Or who do we report it out to? I'll open it up to the group. So if you have an initiative, let's say it's around waste, or maybe it's around number of meals delivered, or it might be something around bringing people out of a poverty level as a program goal. Why do we want to report that out? And who would we report it out to? Let me open it up to the group.
Employees.
Employees, why is that?
Accountability. Get them on board.
Okay.
Disperse the responsibility among everybody.
All right, good.
Instead of keeping it in maybe a green team.
Right.
You might need that team to keep the word going out.
Right. Good.
Say publicly too, also for accountability just for the entire company. Maybe there's some online forum or somewhere that local companies can see metrics that are going on. They can compare yourself to them and try to join together.
Good. And competition is really healthy. And in fact, there are many people who would say sort of peer interaction and enlightening that or igniting that competitive spirit is like the best way to get some of this stuff done. What else? Why do we want to report out our performance?
In our case, it would be donors, because we have a commitment to transparency, and you want to show that you're not only achieving the mission but doing it in the most sustainable way. And I think that's what they expect, is that you're making these incremental improvements.
Right. Good. All right.
Owners, investors. Investors.
Yeah.
Investors the same way. Absolutely, investors. They want to know how you're doing from an impact perspective, right?
Yeah, if you have the right investors. So you heard the talk this morning about some investors have different expectations, and that's always a challenge about how much of your budget do you put towards things that are going to reduce expenses that aren't really accounted for by our economic system.
Right. That's right. So let's sort of build on that. There's a business case, as you all know, to sustainable practices. Some of it's measurable in economic terms, some of it's not. In the vast majority of cases, you can take a soft benefit, an intangible, and make it quantitative. So let me give you an example. So GHG reduction, that's a tragedy of the commons. But we have public markets now that actually price tons of carbon. And in the States it's $10 to $20. In Europe it could even be higher. But there are sort of known assumptions around the price of carbon that you could very well quantify the value of that, right? So as you lower your carbon footprint, you could say, I've seen it done a couple ways. Bruce, I've seen it shown in terms of it's equivalent to taking cars off the road, right? Or planting trees,
or turning off
right?
lights, whatever it may be.
But I've also seen it as, at a current market rate, this reduction in carbon is worth this amount.
Yeah.
Another way to potentially look at soft impacts are brand loyalty among customers. In fact, we know that 50 to 70% of consumers really would rather work with and buy things from sustainable companies than not. What's that mean for loyalty and retention? It means a lot. And in fact, you look at many categories like cleaning products, so what we call LOHAS products, right? Lifestyles of health and sustainability. A lot of those categories are driven by authentic reporting and good labeling around sustainable practices, right? So you look at EO products, right, or down in Marin. Anybody know EO products, right? The natural oils and healthcare and personal care products. $55 million company. And from 20 years ago when they started, the DNA was built in around sustainability and health and natural products, right? Phenomenal loyalty. You talk to EO product users and they wouldn't use anything else.
They have a booth out there.
They have a booth out here, right? So check them out. But what we have also around EO products is something called a Net Promoter Score. How many of you have heard of this NPS? What's NPS mean?
It's basically a survey that rates customer loyalty, and I can't remember exactly the mechanism, but it's a simple question, and it's like you subtract something from something else and it gives you your score.
Right. So very simple little metric around loyalty and word of mouth. So a Net Promoter Score question is, for this particular product or for this particular company, on a scale of 1 to 10, where 1 is not at all and 10 is absolutely yes, to what extent would you recommend this product or this company to your friends and family?
Thus the word promoter. That's how it works.
Right.
Yeah. Who's your promoter? Who's your detractor?
Right. So you take the 1s and 2s and 3s; those are detractors, right? They're going to tell 20 people if they're pissed off or unhappy with your brand or your company. And you take the 8, 9s, and 10s; those are promoters, right? And you sort of subtract, the distractors, the low scale people from the high scale people, right? You take all the 1s, 2s, and 3s, 4s combined. You take that aggregate, you subtract it from the 7, 8, 9, 10s. Make sense, right? And you get a net. Hopefully it's positive, right? Hopefully you've got more promoters than you have detractors. But that's what we call a Net Promoter Score.
I would rate the detractors a little higher on a scale, give them like a 1.5.
Right. And oftentimes we take 1, 2, 3, 4s, we aggregate them, and we only take the 8, 9s, and 10s. So in effect, it's weighted a little more towards the detractors. But that's another metric that's very real. And we look at NPS, and many companies and brands are using that as a brand health indicator. It drives revenues in a very significant way. And so there are companies that actually equate 1 or 2 percentage bump ups in Net Promoter Score to hundreds or thousands, millions of dollars of product sales. And in fact, you all potentially could do that for your own particular categories. So, but also the share of wallet and retention of customers is part of NPS, right? Because you've got these promoters, right, who by word of mouth are promoting your product, right? Because you're being authentic with your reporting, the values that your company has or the brand has resonates with their own value systems, right?
It seems like there was an AT&T survey years ago that actually skewed the negative. They said if someone's not happy or irritated with your company, they'll tell 12 to 15 people, and people that are happy tell 3 or 4.
That's exactly right. Yeah, it's about a 2 to 3 to 1 ratio, the detractors over the promoters.
So multiply them times 3.
Yeah.
Now that yields, I think, a caveat or a warning to you all to greenwash proof your messaging, right? So people are very sensitive, very skeptical about some of this messaging that we have, right? As sustainability champions. So you all, as champions, as messengers, need to be really conscious of being authentic in communicating your metrics and your performance. You need to have authentic stories and examples and cases, and at the same time, open up the kimono and admit where you're falling down. I've seen some very powerful stories where companies say, we are not doing a good job here, right? And we need to, and here's what we're doing about it. And people love, stories from, coming up from the floor. Yeah.
I think also what's really useful about the Net Promoter Score is they say to kind of like forget about the 1s, 2s, and 3s, not to forget, but to focus on your middle people, because the time and resources you need to make those into your 8s, 9s, and 10s. And those people then tell more and more people that to get a 1 to be a 10 is so much work. They say, like, don't spend all your energy focusing on all of this detractor, but spend your energy into making someone a promoter.
I think that depends to some extent on what your product is, because if you have a consumer product that, you know, burns somebody's house down or causes them to be on the phone with somebody in India for 5 hours, you know, they just have this horrible experience where they can't wait to share it with somebody else. That's different than somebody who just doesn't like your policies or the color of your user interface or something. And I don't know how those get measured in this whole scheme of things, but I think you have to make a distinction between, if somebody has a bad experience, you can take them, and sometimes if it's like, customer service, they can go from a 1 to a 10 through this quote-unquote recovery process where, we'll come out to your house, we'll not only replace this, we'll replace all of them, and we'll do it for free, and we'll mow your lawn too. And then all of a sudden, it's like, well, these people really do care. So that's different than changing a broader product strategy over a period of months or years, just for what it's worth.
So let me finish off this business case notion. Obviously, we all know about cost savings, right? You know, on the energy side, you don't want to solarize your inefficiencies, right? So before we put alternative energy on our building, we go through an energy efficiency project, right? And we look at all the ways that we can lower our overall load, and then we solarize, right? Or then we take an alternative. Does that make sense, right? Energy efficiency has the absolute highest ROI of any operational thing you can do. So you all need to be kind of looking at that as the absolute low-hanging fruit for your organizations.
Do you need to have these lights on, by the way?
I think we do for video.
Okay.
Yeah. You know, well said as an inverter man. So energy efficiency, really, really critical. We found at a recent outreach down in San Rafael, small retailers, small restaurants, on average, businesses were saving $2,200 a year on energy savings just with some simple retrofits around energy. I mean, just lights and a little bit of HVAC. I mean, it was amazing savings.
Turning the temperature down a little bit.
Turning some temperature down, motion sensors. I mean, there's some real low-hanging fruit things that we can do. Let me finish up around this business case. When we survey students coming out of college, and we ask them, who do you want to work with? About 70 to 80% of them say, I want to work with a company whose values are aligned with mine. And especially the millennials. Half of the millennials say they're willing to pay more from a company that is demonstrating sustainable practices. They want to work for those companies at a lower salary. They're willing to do that. So in terms of attraction and retention, having these values in your organization and really performing on them makes a big difference. And by the way, what's it cost to hire and retrain a typical mid-level employee? Anybody have a guess? It takes typically 1.5 times their annual salary. You believe that? So you lose somebody, even mid-level, you're going to spend 1.5 times their annual salary to recruit them, a replacement, to train that person, get them up to productive state.
So you're saying it's 1.5 years to break even.
Yeah. If you lose somebody, that's a big cost to the organization. So we need to pay attention to aligning our organization's values to theirs, or making sure that our employees are on board, they're engaged, they're proud of who they work for.
Getting information on that, there's 2 ways I'm thinking of that is, one, actually surveying your own employees before and after exit interviews. And there might be other just industry stuff, like where somebody has done a survey of people who joined companies, who left companies. Is there data that we could have access to that would help us that without having to go through an expensive survey process ourselves?
Right. Give me your card afterwards, and I'm happy to to try to dig that up.
Okay, thanks.
But it's there's some HR associations that'll do that kind of work or have done that work. So thanks. All right, so we got a strong business case, right, for adopting these practices, for tracking our progress, for reporting them out. So, for example, as I mentioned, we've got surveys that say, half of the millennials will pay extra for sustainable products. About a quarter of baby boomers will. We've got their big percentage of these groups are saying they check labels. They pay real attention to labels that demonstrate social and environmental impact. And again, similar percentages, half the millennials, quarter of the baby boomers will say, I want to work with a sustainable company, right? So this is not just sort of soft, sort of intangibles. This is real money. Has real impact on organizations. All right. Let's. So my question to you all, again, as champions, as somebody that's may want to be tracking this performance is: are you educating your customers, through either traditional media or social media? Anybody here that are sort of trying to do outreach to your customers or to your stakeholders around your sustainable performance? You're doing it. So what are you doing with outreach or with marketing?
Well, we have a few different things, and a lot of it comes from the fact that we're a B Corp, so we already have a lot of metrics and measurements. So part of it is about getting that information out there. We have a lot of information on our website so that our customers can see our carbon footprint, our energy use, even more the social dynamics of our work. So, and then we have newsletters that we put out once a quarter that include that.
Good. How many of you are having some give and take with customers, either through social media or through blogs or whatever about sustainability performance? So you may say, all right, we're low on our footprint, our carbon or water footprint in the next year. Here's what we've done. Here's some initiatives. But you provide an avenue to give feedback on that. Anybody doing that? Yeah. Okay.
Not so much. Well, I work at a winery,
Right.
and it's not so much through social media, but educational tours that are given daily. So part of it is the history of the winery, but included in that is how we've developed our sustainable practices.
And what winery are you in?
Rodney Strong Vineyards.
Okay.
So that's on the daily, and that could always lead into social media discussions, but it's nice to have that face-to-face interaction.
Right. I've actually got a slide from your website.
That was probably, yeah. So,
Is that your work?
Well, part of it.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, so Rodney Strong does a great storytelling around some of these major initiatives that they've got around, cultivation, land use, water conservation, social impact. So that's great to have you here.
Yeah, it's great to
as
be
an
here.
example. Yeah. Now, any of you, does Rodney Strong or does your organization talk to or survey customers about what's important to them? Do you guys do any of that?
Kind of. We do customer service feedback surveys, and within that, the only thing that maybe this fits into is that we ask if they fill out the survey, we donate to a nonprofit.
Okay.
And so then they can choose whether it's social or environmental in like a couple different categories. So that kind of lets us know what they care about because we see where they want their money going.
Right.
That's
That's good. Yeah, that helps. So how many of you are actually either annually or more often surveying your stakeholders? Anybody doing that, getting feedback? What are you guys
We
doing?
do it around satisfaction.
Satisfaction, okay. Anybody else doing sort of survey work?
Yeah,
Or
we
you
do,
a little bit
but
of it?
not on the sustainability only.
Right,
Yeah.
right, okay. So let me recommend that you really do provide some feedback mechanisms, to your customers, your employees, your stakeholders. If you're nonprofits, obviously you want to talk to your investors and your members and your donors. But it's really important to kind of get your ears open again to these various stakeholder groups on an ongoing basis. So satisfaction is important, and sort of customer or member experience is important. and there's really no excuse now not to have that kind of feedback. You got some really great tools out there that can be online. They can get through 5-minute little survey, and you've got hopefully some actionable findings from those. And insert in those questions things like what's important to you in dealing either with us or a company like us. And in those lists of attributes, you want to sort of put something around their commitment to social and environmental performance. Or you can get even more specific. A company's carbon footprint that they reported out, and they're making progress on that, right? Or their water footprint, right? And so, depending on what your goals are and how important some of this performance is, you want to ask, well, how important is it to our customer? Right? So, for yours, you're already, have a mechanism that you're getting some feedback. You insert a couple of questions around that.
Yeah.
I think that'd be an easy metric. Now, how many are you reporting out to the press around some of your social or environmental performance? Anybody doing press work? So what do you guys do?
It's mostly around product, because the product that we sell is all about reducing carbon footprint.
Right. They make inverters, right? For solar.
For solar, yeah, okay. And but the what you make and how you make it are something that we're trying to get better alignment with. So I think that the assumption is we're making this great product. We're not paying as much attention as we need to. That's why we're working on it, to look at the whole supply chain. So the focus has really been on whenever we do something that's special, and like donating product to a community, a low-income community somewhere. That's the media stuff.
Right. Anybody else working with the media? Okay. So there's plenty of room to grow, plenty of room for improvement, right? Our local media is very supportive of sustainable performance, right? I mean, and this is a great culture in the North Bay. Everybody in the North Bay? Pretty much? Yeah. So you got some good stories, they're going to take it and they're going to run with it. So it's just a matter of writing up a little story. It could be just something around working with a supplier that reduces your water or your waste. It could be a recycling campaign around the product design. It could be around your recycling. You've gone from 50% down to or up to 75% diversion from landfill, right? Just little success stories that the press will eat up, and in your newsletters and in your Facebook and Twitter feeds and your LinkedIn course work, you want to just highlight some of those stories. It's a pretty simple effort. It doesn't take a lot, but it goes a long way to show, hey, you're making the effort, and here's some authentic stories about it. You remember, you got to be careful about greenwashing, so you don't want to be throwing out a story that puffs your chest without any real performance. And you got to be careful about even the language, right? How many of you are tired of seeing the word natural in your labels and in the messaging of products? So this is, and we have about 450 eco certifications now in America, consumer products. So you can imagine the consumers' sort of dismay about what do these labels mean. So, but I think if you establish a good connection, you tell your customers, your employees what sustainability means for us, and here are our goals, and here's how we're progressing. That's authentic. I think you're going to be in good shape, in doing that. All right. Here's Rodney Straw. So they've got some great stories around water conservation, about soil, about economic feasibility, social equity, and click on that and get some drill downs around their performance. We've got a little video there, so I'm assuming that's your baby and you helped a little bit, or I'll take credit for
yeah,
that.
No, there were many people who were involved, including some of my friends. So I'm pretty
There you go. And we didn't even corroborate before.
No.
That's right.
I'm sure Rodney Strong will be happy to hear that they were used as an example. Yeah.
So I'm going to throw up a visual because some of you like visuals around sort of process. This may look complicated. It doesn't need to be. But what this shows is an evolution of an organization on a sustainability path. So many of you are in a pilot stage where you're taking initiatives, where you're taking small projects and you're working on them to prove the business case and get some credibility, get some resources, get the attention of the CFO and the CEO. And we're doing assessments and setting goals and funding them and tracking them. But then as we get more and more successes, and as we start saving money, we can allocate more towards programs and initiatives and things that have long lives. And eventually we get to a systemic stage where it's just baked into everything we do, right? Everything is around conserving resources, having strong social impact, and it's just permeating the organization. So when we start to set goals around our sustainability performance, I like to use SMART metrics, SMART goals. So what's SMART mean? Anybody here use that term or know it? What's a SMART goal?
Yeah, I mean, we use it in our goal setting for design performance reviews and things like that. Just kind of, it's a framework for people just to get down to write specific goal, have a timeline to it, know what they're measuring, and really kind of avoids just the abstract of I want to accomplish this year with no actual measurement to it.
Right. So what's SMART actually stand for? Do you know, Barry?
Not remember.
You can read that. So specific, right? We want to be very specific about what that goal or that metric is. We want it to be measurable because we can't really manage things if it's not measurable. It's got to be feasible. The team can't think, what's that guy smoking, right? It's got to be, feasible within the realm of possibility. So it's attainable. It's got to be relevant to the organization, right? So if you're running a social impact, social benefit organization, carbon measurement may not be at the top of mind among some of your donors, right? That may not be an appropriate metric for an organization like yours. But for others in manufacturing or assembling or transportation, carbon footprint's really critical, alternatives. And then finally, timely. Our goal needs to have some kind of time element to it, right? To say, all right, listen, we're going to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions by 20% by 2020. That's succinct. It gives communities and organizations real focus on a timely way.
5 minutes.
5 minutes? Okay. So we know around indicators and the practices around economic performance, right? We've got cash flows, we've got P&Ls, we've got trade-off and metrics around the timing of investments and how much it costs to pay back certain investments. We have a pretty good handle on that typically. Around environmental practices, I call them the big four. Watts, water, waste, and wheels. So what do I mean by that? Obviously, energy, we want to measure our wattage, right? And we can get bills from our utility companies, establish a baseline, and look at ways for reduction. We can do assessments, right, of our electricity use. Same with water. Your utility company will come in and oftentimes do an assessment for your organization. And you can look at retrofit appliances and we, water's the new carbon, isn't it? Right? So we're very sensitized now to water conservation. Around waste, again, we do an assessment, we do an audit, we figure out ways that we can reduce our production waste, our packaging waste, both in and going out of the organization. And then wheels, I mean transportation. Transportation for most organizations can be as much as 30 to 50% of the carbon footprint of the organization. And oftentimes it's around the fleet, but oftentimes it's around the commute, right, to your organization as well as your supply chain. So pay attention to the use of fossil fuel driven vehicles, whether it be in your fleet or among your commuters. So this is some of the indicators we might use. On the social, on the employee side, we might look at, again, benefit packages around work, life, and family balance. There are particular programs that we can put in place and we can measure those. We can look at unpaid or paid leave for care dependents. We can look at group health plans. On the civic side, I like looking at contributions and the level per employee as a metric. I like using or having programs in place where you allow 1 to 10% of an employee's hours to be used for their favorite charity or their favorite community activity that they can choose from. That's an example. Or what percentage of the employees serving on boards of local nonprofits. That's another metric. All right. So here's some examples of some functional areas. So we're around energy. It might be around climate neutrality. It might be around, again, the watts or the therms per square foot. And what I mean by that is I wanted to highlight the notion of the denominator. What do I mean by the denominator? What it means is when you have a measure, whether it be watts or water, it could even be waste, you have to have a denominator under that number. So for example, kilowatts per square foot is really what we want to be measuring, right? Because what if we expand our building, right? Well, our watts per are going to absolutely go up, but perhaps we put a lot of efficiency programs in place, but we've still expanded the square footage, but so that ratio of kilowatts per square foot will most likely be going down. It's what we would call intensity. The intensity of energy or water per a square foot. We also use some of these measures against a production unit. Gallons of water per unit of iced tea or beer. The amount of wastewater per case of wine. So that's what I mean by denominator, right? So pay attention as you set these sort of goals and performance metrics to make sure you're clear on your denominator. What are you measuring underneath it? And that measures sort of your intensity level or your relative efficiency around that. So around products, you might want to be looking at the percentage of sales from sustainable or green products in your product lines. For supply chain, you may want to be looking at if you have a sustainability index, right? So you're asking specific questions of your suppliers in a consistent sort of way. What percentage of those suppliers are conforming? That's a typical metric that's used. That can be very effective. Okay. All right. Employee again could be retention rates. I like using wages relative to industry benchmarks. Increasingly, communities are really encouraging their organizations to look at commuting and wellness programs as a part of their benefit packages, right? So down in San Rafael, for example, we're looking at ways to really reduce our carbon footprint as a community resulting from transportation. It's about 60% of Marin's carbon footprint. And businesses, half of that or more, from commuters and from our fleets, from our suppliers bringing in products. So what can we do to really encouraging ride share and bike use right among our employees and bake that into our benefit programs, right? Some pre-tax programs potentially could help that. So this is a little simple little matrix. I sort of call it the the 5 W's of sustainable operations. And we've got across the top, lots, wastewater, wheels, and wellness. Wellness covers some of our benefits and some of our social impact. And what we want to do there then is to measure and apply those metrics across the 5 Ps. And the 5 Ps would be products, production, people, purchasing, and our buildings, our plant. Kind of a simple sort of matrix that we can look at as we measure our sustainability performances. I think that's going to be about it for our timing.
We'll go to 5 after, because you started a little later.
Okay.
Are we going to still be able to get ice cream? Because that's a big part of my metric.
It is. Well, mine too. So let me open it up to questions. Kind of hard to cover everybody's issues, but we can do it now. I know, Bruce, you're doing some initiatives around your supply chain, but was there anything else you wanted to kind of dive down into?
There was actually something.
Let me open it up to the rest of the group. Kind of talk about some broad strokes, but also some things that we can drill down into in terms of measuring our progress. Yeah, go ahead.
How about financial institutions? How do they measure their impact for investments?
Okay, so we certainly have had some of the analyst community and standards communities like SASB, which is the Sustainable Accounting Standards Board, come up and start to be used much more in assessing risk and performance based on sustainable practices. So SASB is very much a bona fide organization that's having real impact on the analyst community. So we're seeing Wall Street and that community using non-financial performance metrics for assessing risk again and for forecasting and for the health of an organization. So we're starting to see that, from an institutional and from a public perspective. So now, were you asking also around banks and
Exactly.
Around lending specifically?
Yeah,
or?
lending, yeah.
Okay. And the question is, to what extent are they using either your goals or your actual performance to assess risk?
Right, instead
Okay.
of just return on investment,
Right.
there's externalized costs, impacts that can't be measured like they were talking about
Right.
this morning.
It's tough to find that getting baked in many traditional lending institutions. So I got to be honest with you. You don't see that many yet.
We can start.
We can start, and from a building perspective, you have, and from a real estate lending perspective, you certainly have benefits and risks reduced around LEED certification.
Sure.
and performance on the part of buildings. I mean, we know that LEED, and we've had LEED certifications now out for close to 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
It's documented that on average it takes 3 to 5% more money to build out a LEED certified building, but over a period of 10 years, the value of that building relative to another similar class building is 30 to 50% more. Operating costs are 40% less than a comparable class building. So on the real estate side, we definitely have our lenders really appreciating these performance. Other questions? Well, thanks everybody. I'm Chris Yalonis. Thank you very much for joining us.